commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Signal Corps, which is the information technology officer, and the rest is history. When I joined the Army, the only thing that I could even imagine being was a signal officer. A lot of people say to me, hey Chris, how have you been so focused? How have you accomplished all the things that you've done?
The president of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated, Chris V. Ray. What's going on, everybody? Myles, m.youngblood here at the Beyond Ordinary podcast. I got another banger for y'all. I got a special guest, the president of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated, Chris V. Ray. How you doing today, good brother?
I'm doing good, my brother.
Good. I told you earlier, the brothers of Alpha Chapter got some questions for you, but we're not going to start off with those. We're not going to get out the gate with those. So I just want to talk about, your time in the Army, time as a Sigma president, and then your time as president at Barber-Scotia. But let's start over at the Army. I didn't even know that you were in the Army. Tell me, what got you into that? What made you want to go to the military?
So my uncle, who raised me, I was raised by my grandmother and my uncle. My uncle was in the military. And one day I was working for the U.S. Census Bureau. It was like some summer gig I had. And I just had a little voice that just spoke to me. And it was just like, go to the Army. And I mean, it was just literally like that. So on my lunch break, I went to the recruiting center. I told them that I was interested in joining. And they said, had you taken the ASFAB? I was like, no, I haven't taken the ASFAB. I took the ASFAB a couple of days later. I scored pretty high on it. And next thing you know, man, I enlisted. And I was very familiar with the military life because my uncle, like I said, he, I've been with him ever since he was Sergeant Ray, and he just poured into me, as a kid. And so it was very, very second nature for me. Just because he had a very regiment life for me, very disciplined, and it was a good fit. It was a good fit for me. So I enlisted and was a computer information technology analyst. I went on to officer candidate school a couple of years later. I got commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Signal Corps, which is the information technology officer. And the rest is history, man. Mm-hmm. Went off to war and did all kind of crazy stuff.
What about cybersecurity? What made you want to be in IT cybersecurity?
Yeah, so my uncle, right? Again, I go back to my
big inspiration.
Yeah, he was a huge inspiration in my life. He was an information technology soldier and then eventually became an information technology officer in the Army. And so I just followed in his footsteps. And I mean, as a kid, I can remember sitting with him while he was studying for his boards and studying for other competitions that he was doing or just learning the equipment. And so I would just sit with him and read the same manuals and go through, what he was learning. I would quiz him on the information that he had, whether he was going for Soldier of the Year competition or he was like, hey, there's this new equipment that just came down. And so I would see him in the living room just reading over it, going over it. I'm like, well, what is that? And he's like, well, I'm trying to learn how this signal interacts with the atmosphere. And, so to make sure that we can stretch the signal across the horizon, but it depends on the atmospheric pressure and da-da-da-da-da. So he was going on and I would just sit there at 11, 12, 13, sucking it up. And when I joined the Army, the only thing that I could even imagine being was a signal officer. I was being a signal soldier at the time. And so, of course, the military transformed on the IT side where we were more focused on making sure that we could talk in the desert, like what we always said. But then we got to a point to where cybersecurity became a thing. So when I joined the Army in 2020, cybersecurity wasn't a thing, right? It was, we were building networks, but it wasn't about defending the network other than making sure that the information that we had was encrypted, whether we were in the desert trying to talk back to the Pentagon. We just needed to make sure that it was encrypted, but we wasn't thinking about the global threat that we have today around all the networks that you have to defend and cybersecurity and all of those different things. Now, of course, that evolved over time. And as an information technology officer, I just grew with it. But in 2022, I retired from the Army. But my uncle, he's still in. Matter of fact, he is, we're keeping our fingers crossed that he's going to get promoted to a 3-star general soon. So he went from being Private Ray, made it all the way to the rank of E7. And then he went to what was called Warrant Officer School and became a warrant officer in the Army. Made it to W-2, came down on the list for W-3, but then decided to go to Officer Candidate School and became a second lieutenant and has just tracked his way all the way to now he's a 2-star general. He's an amazing leader, man. So when a lot of people say to me, hey, Chris, how have you been so focused, or, how have you accomplished all the things that you've done? It started from having a great inspiration, which was my uncle, who is literally the greatest man I've ever known.
Oh, yeah, you actually jumped ahead of that. That was going to be one of my questions about like how you've been able to climb the ranks. But that's incredible that you went from private to like, what is that?
Yeah. He's like, what's that? He's he's 07 now, 07, 7, 8, 9. Yep, 09. He's about to be 010. Yep.
So now, what do you think about cybersecurity now, since you've been like in the weeds? Are our devices as secure as these companies and try to make it seem like they are?
So the real answer is yes and no. And I know that's complicated, right? So on the front side, it's secure in the sense of the majority of the people who has the equipment that they have, they're not bad actors, right? But there are individuals who are just bad actors. They figure out how the software works and how the network, operates. And so therefore they just, some folks, they do it because they want to just see what their skill sets are capable of. And then there are individuals who absolutely want to manipulate, information, steal information, sell information to other actors around the world. It's a whole business, right? So when you think about the Pentagon, on a daily basis, the Pentagon's national database or mainframe gets hit over 80, 90,000 times a day, right? From just, and it's probably even more now, but during my time, that's, people pinging all around the world trying to find an entry point into the system, right? And then to pull information out. The reality is that folks have to believe that your information is out there, right? No ifs, ands, buts. Every time that you have received an email from Target or CarMax or whoever you've dealt with that says, we have a data breach, some information may have been taken, we're taking steps to mitigate. What they're telling you is that we're covering, our rear end. But the reality is that there may have been a breach. But what's happening around the world is that there is a group of individuals who is taking information from one company, and then they're taking information from another company, and then they're selling all the data to, say, a third party who's collating all that information on building a profile on you as an individual, right? So when your iPhone tells you that, this password has been utilized several times in several accounts that you own, and by the way, this information has now been breached because they know that the company that you was with, that you had a profile with at, campamerica.com, but you open up an account there, you created a user account and a password, but now Camp America has now been compromised, and now they done taken your information. Now you have not changed your password on all your other accounts, but then your information is then breached somewhere else. And so there's a third company that runs a supercomputer that's taking all of your information and they're collating it and then deciding, okay, we're going to stop here now. We're going to try to see if we can breach this person's info, right? Because now we've gotten your birthday from this company, and then we got, part of your social from this company. And that's how, identity theft and all these different things are happening. But the reality is that we are becoming such a connected world that it is very difficult to quote unquote live off the grid. You can, but then that's a different quality of life, right? So who doesn't want to do it? So that's why you as an individual have to be very mindful about what you're putting out there, and then be smart, right? We always tell folks, don't use your debit card as your main use. If you have a credit card, use your credit card instead of your debit card.
Why?
Because think about it. If you use your debit card everywhere you tap, right? You go and you're using your debit card, what's happening is that number is being entered into the database for that company. Now, not all company securities are the same, right? Some company will only take the 3 digits from your debit card, the last 4 or 5, last 3 or 4 digits, and use it. But then another company has taken your whole credit card number. Right. And so now this bad acting company over here who has now hacked this company and has hacked that company, they've now been able to build a profile. Now they have your debit information, which they can now go ahead on and take all your money. But by the way, if you just use your credit card, the laws are set up in such a way that you can recover your money, from fraudulent activity from a credit card faster than you can from your debit card. Right. And that's money that comes directly out of your bank account. So we always try to tell folks, if you have access to a credit card, use your credit card instead. Right. Because if it gets compromised, it's easy to call them and say, hey, I don't authorize this charge. I didn't authorize this charge. They do an investigation, and then they're able to credit it back. Normally with your bank card, it takes a longer investigation. Some banks, depending on their policies, it may not be that you ever get that money back, right? And so that's why if you're going to put a digital card out there with your information that's going to access to your money, let it be a credit card and not your debit card, because a bad actor can take your money. You go to the ATM, now you're wiped out. It may take 4 or 5. It may take a week or 2 before you're able to recover your money. How does it, how you going to pay your bills? Now you don't have access to capital compared to if your credit card gets compromised and it happens. And the thing about it is all companies get hit. Every day there's a briefing that happens to a section of the Pentagon that shows all the companies that are hit from a cybersecurity standpoint every single day.
Really?
Every single day.
Insane.
Yeah, every day.
And then what do they talk about? Just how to...
Well, no, I mean, what they're saying is what they do is they get a list of these companies that have been hit, right? There are some governments, local governments, who their information has been compromised. They're hacking into local governments. Because now they got a copy of your water bill, and then they got a copy. They're again companies building profiles on individuals around the world, or they have locked out all of the government computers, for the government agencies, right? That you can't get in. They've now taken control of those systems, and so now you have to pay an individual to try to recover the information. And sometimes, some governments, local governments pay, some individuals don't. But think about the disruption that happens to your operations of business. Well, we'll say, we're going to start all over. And some of it comes from, unfortunately, because the patches, you have a printer that's on the network and the printer was never patched, right? So there was an update. That's why running updates are important. Because why? Because someone has figured out how to get through the system. That's why they always have system updates. And so, but what happened is that the IT guy didn't put the printer on the network to be updated. And so someone who's hacking into the network finds a portal through the printer, to get into the network that now impacts everybody. And that's how it is. So when you're an IT manager and you're running at a company and a system, it's so important, man, that you know what you're doing, because you could leave exposure to that company or that organization in a very big way if you don't realize that, oh man, I forgot that these 3 printers have not been updated in, the last 2 months. And so the patches that they needed are now they're left vulnerable. And so therefore, because there's always somebody trolling on the network,
of course,
to see how they can get into, they're riding the back end of the internet and they're looking for ports to get into other networks. That's all it is. And then they just snooping around. Some people just snooping around. They just want to see if they can do it. Yeah. And some people are like, I am trying to steal information from this company, corporate espionage, all that stuff is real.
So outside of, just using your credit card for purchases, how else could people protect themselves from cybersecurity attacks?
Yeah. So, one of the things that folks really have to be educated on the fact that, these threats are, number one, that they're happening, right? And so you just have to be mindful on how much information that you're putting out there, whether it's through social media, when you talk about, your profile, or again, when you're out here in the economy, in the market, if you're talking about protecting your money, again, the best way is to limit how many credit cards you have and then being able to navigate the process, if you are hit. Another piece is making sure that you have credit identity fraud on your credit report, right? So a lot of individuals don't realize that, they're getting hit, their information is being used, and they don't find out till later on, like, man, my identity was stolen. Well, you didn't have any credit monitoring on your profile. And some of those systems are, they're pretty affordable, right? Where they are actually monitoring your information, like, hey, your profile was run today, your credit was run today. And you were like, hey, I didn't open up a mortgage with SunTrust and, and banking, but a lot of folks don't want to do that level of investment, right? They just don't. They see that $159 a year fee as, oh man, I don't want to pay that, but you just spent, mad money at the club though, or, you just bought 2 bottles of Macallan 12s. And so therefore, which equals how much it would have cost you to just invest in yourself to protect your identity. A lot of folks just don't do it. They don't see the value in it until they get hit. And it's just like having insurance, right? The reality is that most companies cannot protect you from, cyber threats and, cyber attacks. They just can't. And they make sure that that's a part of their fine print. That's a part of the fine print, right?
The risk disclaimer.
But so a part of what you have to do is for yourself is make sure that you're protecting your identity. Make sure that you're limiting the usage of your cards that's out there in the global space. You got to make sure when you go online, if you're doing any shopping, always look for the little lock, right? Always look for the security lock that's in the browser to let you know that the website that you are doing business with has at least the highest level of encryption, so that as you're typing in your credit card information that is moving across the web, that is encrypted moving across the web, you just don't know how many people purchase things online and never look for the security lock that's in the browser. That lets you know. So where you type in the website and you go through, you get where I want to buy this this shirt. Well, okay, you're getting ready to buy the shirt. You go to checkout. When you go to checkout, look in the browser. Is there a little lock in the browser? A little lock. And if you don't see the lock, that means that company is not using the best encryption possible to protect your information. And so, which means that when you make that purchase, someone from another country has already intercepted that transaction and gotten your information, compared to the fact that there is a lock that the company's using. They're using the highest level of encryption to protect your information that's moving across the web. Little things like that, man, you got to pay attention to, because just think about, you're on Instagram, these ads pop up, which sometimes
go to a random shop.
Some of the most dope, little things that pop up. You're like, oh man, I would like to use that. You click on it and you decide you want to get it, but that's a fake website from a bad acting country somewhere, and they're just waiting for you to put in your information. And then when you hit pay now, they pull out whatever money that they can from you, but you didn't realize, like, man, is this even a secure website that I'm going to? Right?
Yeah, those are things that people don't think about, and I appreciate you dropping that wisdom. I honestly didn't even know what that lock in the corner was.
Yeah, man, 23 years in the Army. That's what I used to do, man.
Yeah. So we was talking about your Army journey. Now let's talk about your Sigma journey. I know that you are a first generation Greek. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yes, sir. So how'd you go about being interested in Greek life as a first generation Greek? How'd you doing membership?
So, I was a track guy.
Okay.
I ran track, went to East Carolina University. And while I was at ECU, there was a couple of guys, it was a lot of guys on the track team that were Sigmas, right? I knew nothing about Greek life growing up. I remember seeing the letters on people's vehicles, but I didn't know what they were. And, so it didn't matter. But then I got to college, and then a lot of the guys had this, Phi Beta Sigma. And my freshman year, we would go to track meets. And because East Carolina had, at that time, it was about 8 or 9 brothers on the track team that were Sigmas. Mm-hmm. And, that's a nice little brothers, right? So we'll go to track meets, and then other Sigmas from other teams would see them, and then they would come and collate with them. And I would just, be paying attention. And then I would go back, later on, we're riding on the van or riding on the bus, and I was like, well, did you know that guy from LSU, or did you know that guy from University of Florida? I'm like, no, we just met him for the first time. That'll be like,
it's funny.
But they would be there kicking it like
they go way back.
They go way back. Yeah. And I was fascinated. When I say fascinated, I was fascinated by it. Like, wow, so these are your brothers. And they were like, yeah, so they would break it down for me, explain it to me. And then on the campus, it was as if though every week the Sigmas were doing something on campus, right? They always had a table, some cause, they trying to save somebody or save something. And it was just really refreshing. And it was, again, seeing guys my age actually engaged and involved with the community. So they had adopted this center called the Little Willie Center, which they had adopted for mentoring a lot of young kids. And so they always had these, kids on the yard, or they were always doing stuff for the homeless shelter that we did. And so I was just really impressed with them. And then there were other fraternities, right? So now I was like, well, let me start paying attention, because I'm like, well, maybe what drew me in with Sigma from talking with the brothers were, it's like, hey, you join organizations like this and it helps to develop you. Now, here I am coming from a household where, like I said, my grandmother raised me. My uncle was a big influencer in my life. So I'm always looking for something positive, right? And so I recognize that, hey, here goes something that could probably be very positive for me. And I, just gravitated, towards it. And once I did my research, and again, back then we didn't have the internet, right? So it wasn't like, let me jump online real quick and see what the Sigmas were about. The good thing that the Sigmas had, and then even the other fraternities, they had a lot of documents of the caliber of men that were in their organization, right? And so, the John Lewises of the world, the Huey P. Newtons of the world, the George Washington, these guys, to me, A. Philip Randolph, they were like game changers. These were, and I was like, I admired a lot of those men. And so it just became like a real natural fit, for me. And then on top of that, these guys I'm fellowshipping with on a daily basis. And, so it was just a great fit. And so then in the fall of, 1996, me and the 6 other guys got together and decided, let's do this thing.
Do it, yeah.
Let's do it. And as they say, man, the rest is history. I had no idea that, when I crossed in October, I had no idea that I would be the national president. I was, first of all, I was glad it was over.
Mm-hmm.
So let me start there.
Yeah.
I was glad it was over. And then a couple of months later, I went to my first state meeting. They had an executive meeting. The state director at the time was Robert McLean. And Brother McLean had sent out a letter to all the chapters, and it invited the chapters chapters to come to the state executive board meeting. So I just got in my car and I just drove to Raleigh, drove to Durham. It was at University of North Carolina Central in a room on the campus. I walked in and it was just the members of the executive board. It was nobody else came but me. From all the chapters in the state of North Carolina, I was the only one that showed up. I mean, and what he did was he invited, chapters, but I guess it was something that normally people just don't ever come to.
Yeah.
But I was so excited about being a member of the organization, I decided to go. And by showing up, I met a gentleman there by the name of Dudley Flood, and he changed my entire trajectory in Phi Beta Sigma. Dudley Flood did. Man, he was a legend in education in North Carolina. He was a member of the fraternity, and he said to me when I walked into the room and I sat down there, they needed an associate secretary for the board, which is the collegiate position on the state board. And he said, you should do it. He said, because you're showing up now. He said, and half of life, part of life is about just showing up.
Yeah.
And I, of course, at that time I was 19. I didn't understand what he meant by that, but it proved very well because after that, I always stayed in touch with Brother Flood. And every professional opportunity I've ever had, I would reach out to him. He always gave me great advice, but he introduced me to a whole nother world of professional Sigma men. And so at a very young age, I was exposed to men that were talking about, buying homes and mortgages and investing in the real estate and investing in stocks. And so here I am at 20 years old, listening to men talk about life issues and navigating, corporate spaces and how to be a good manager. And, oh man, I just got promoted to being a vice president at my job. And so I went to my first conclave in 1999. They encouraged me to run for international second vice president. And that's really when things really took off, because then I saw Sigma at a whole entirely another level. Then that's when I sat in the room with, true corporate executives, men who were, and at that time in the late 90s, working for Clorox, working for Blockbuster, these men were in spaces that one could only imagine, right? But they were, in my opinion, these were black men that were titans. And I was sitting in the room with them at 20 years old, 19, 20, 21 years old. And they're just pouring into me as a young leader. And so I'm watching them move. I'm watching how they're interacting with each other. I'm watching the politics of the movement of the fraternity. And so that exposure early is what really transformed me to realize that, man, here I am in a space with, all these amazing men and the power of what is possible when men get together to make a difference. And that's how this whole journey for me began, realizing that if I can harness the power of these men, what could we accomplish? And so I stayed engaged. I stayed involved. Like I said, I had an IT background from the military. So, I designed the fraternity's first website. I was a part of the team that designed what we now know as the blueprint for the fraternity, the membership database, all of those things that we did not have, over decades ago. And so being a part of that transformation, really positioned me to get in a space to where, one day I said, I'm around for the top spot. And the brother said, we're going to bless you. Go ahead. Yeah. And it all happened.
So what kept you going? I know you was president of ZNU, you was on the regional board, and now you're international president. Like, what kept you going to keep climbing the ranks?
Yeah. I mean, again, the belief of like, man, if I get this opportunity, what is possible, right? And it was watching the little wins that we had along the way. I mean, I've seen Phi Beta Sigma come a long way. The Sigma that you know today is not the Sigma.
Yeah, I'm only 4 years.
The Sigma 25 years ago is not the Sigma for today, right? It's not the Sigma of today. Our brand was different. Our look was different. Our strategic engagement was different. How people viewed us in the world was different. But I was a part of all these miniature wins for the fraternity as it relates to how do we, change our programming? How do we now account for our information as a brotherhood in terms of how do we calculate how much service we're doing? How do we change our look, right? We didn't have a uniform, blue blazer. So being in the room with us developing that brand, this is how we're going to show up as a unit when we have something that's official and formal. How do we start rethinking our position in the world as an organization politically? How do we identify new organizations that we need to create in order to be a part of what the future looks like? That's where the credit union came from. That's where the PBS Impact Foundation came from. That's where the Sigma Beta Club Foundation came from. That's where the Sigma PAC 1914 came from. And so being a part of all of that growth and that development of the organization and being a part of helping shaping it. And it wasn't just me. Yeah. It was me and a lot of good brothers, man. A lot of good men who, for many hours toiled and teared and fought, to have the Sigma that we have today, where now, we're talking about, breaking ground on a multi-million-dollar affordable housing complex. 20 years ago, that was not even on our things to do list as a fraternity, right? We weren't where we were financially today. We were struggling as a fraternity. We just, the hazing lawsuits had gotten out of control. Financially, we were not in a good place as an organization. We didn't have any clear direction. We just knew that the founders of the fraternity, they had a vision for what we could be. And truth be told, we probably wasn't living up to that all the way at our best capacity.
Really?
We just wasn't.
What were we missing?
We were missing a lot of different things. You were missing the right leaders. You were missing a clear, focused direction for the fraternity. We had a lot of internal battles, and that's just truth, right? A lot of fraternities and sororities have that, right? But it's like, how do you come out of that battle? Do you come out unified, once, you lick your wounds, or do you stay separated? And I think that there was a cadre of us that came through the ranks that understood that what we're doing is for the fraternity, because the fraternity itself, it creates a space and place for people that they can't even imagine, right? There are a lot of guys who grow up who they're an only child, right? So they seek this brotherhood. The fraternity creates a space and place for men to be able to blow off a lot of steam. We live in a society where, you got to be hard,
especially black men too.
Especially black men, right? And then it's so much taboo when it comes to our mental health. And so us getting together as brothers sometimes is its own therapy, and we don't even realize that, right? And some men are able to navigate and move after they've kicked it with their brothers because they had a place to blow off steam and not even realize that this is what I needed, right? The fraternity also creates a place and space for professional growth and development, right? I mean, where do you go where you can have an opportunity to learn Robert's Rules of Order, dress up, go to galas, go to meetings, see the order of meetings and how you comport yourself and carry yourself. The fraternity created every job I had in the Army. Great example. There was a Sigma somewhere along the journey, whether it was a captain or a major or an assignments officer that was helpful in my movement in the military. When I decided to leave the military, go into corporate America, it was a Sigma who gave me my first corporate, America job and allowed me the opportunity to grow in that space. Every professional move that I've made, the majority of those moves and pieces have been because of Phi Beta Sigma, right? And so it's a network that you get to tap into. And I know that my story is a lot of other brothers' story where they can thank the fraternity for, man, my brother, if it wasn't for, them helping me to get this promotion or helping me to get access to X, Y, and Z. That's why we join these organizations. Yeah. Now, there's a lot of people who like to beat their chest and say, well, I did it on my own. I got it. I did it. Yeah. And that's fine too. Good for you, right? But, but there's also our counterparts who are out there. Most of these individuals, man, they're using their network and they're using their access for them to be able to move in spaces and places, for them to create opportunities for their families. Mm-hmm. Why can't we do the same as well? That's what the fraternity brings, right? And that's where the opportunity has been created. So me as a leader, that's what I'm fighting for, right? Is to keep one more organization on this planet that somebody can get an access to be able to hopefully improve their way of life for them and for their family long term.
Most definitely. Yeah. The fraternity, man, I've only been in the fraternity for 4 years, but like you said, there's always been a Sigma along the way. My full-time job that I've had since 2021, because my pro fight referred me, and then I referred a lot of my line brothers and neos, and now that's just a network that we got going.
That's right.
Like you said, you gotta just utilize your network and do what our counterparts do. So one question I do have for you is, we're talking about, the betterment of the fraternity, and I know we recently implemented a legacy clause, and I want to know if you think that legacy clause is beneficial to the organization.
Absolutely. I absolutely believe it's beneficial. Absolutely. Why not? I'm the president of this organization. I've exposed my son. I got 4 boys, right? I absolutely want them to be members of Phi Beta Sigma. Why? Because that's the longevity of the organization, right? That's what breeds the longevity of the organization. And that should be a strategy, right? That should be one of the strategies for continuation of the fraternity. I mean, you have men whose sons have grown up in Sigma Beta. They've exposed their sons to Sigma Beta. They've been wearing the letters. They've been taking their sons to community service events. They've been showing them the right way of how to carry yourself as a man, because based off of what the fraternity has poured into you. And so now I fully expect them to absolutely be members of the organization, and that the legacy piece that we have created, is not supposed to make the way easier, but what it does is it creates an additional pathway for members. And I think what some members are taking it as is that, they get to skate in. They get to skate in. Yeah. But the word skate in means that you're not doing it, the way that we're all supposed to be doing it, which is, you go through the membership intake process, the proper way, the legal way. And so for those who, that's right. So the reality is, so that if you're not doing that way, then that's where that mindset comes from, because it was that thinking is what put us in financial jeopardy before, right?
Right.
And so the reality is that if you're looking at someone whose father or mother is a Zeta who should be a part of the legacy club that we've now created, right, if you're looking at that as just it makes it easier for them to get in, then you just miss the whole point of the continuation of the organization. There should be, in my opinion, there is a couple of legacy legacies that, legacy ways that we should be looking at it. Anyone who's in Sigma Beta, should be someone who we should automatically consider for membership for the organization, right? Because why? Because they've been exposed to Phi Beta Sigma. So, why would you want to go out, and this is, as I call it, crazy thinking. Why do you want to introduce the organization to an individual who has never been exposed to the organization at all first, when you already have a pipeline of someone whose father is a Sigma, mother was a Zeta, someone who was in Sigma Beta, or even someone who received a scholarship from Phi Beta Sigma, which means that they were exposed to us first before that individual that was walking on campus and knew nothing about the organization. You already have, you have potentially 4 already baked in potential members that could join your organization that is exposed to your values and who you are and what you represent. That's easy pickings, right? Because if the goal, it's not about, and this is where, I differ with some of my brothers, right? I'm all about quality of individuals, right? But you could have a whole lot of individuals who are quality as well. Quality doesn't always mean that it's just a small group of people, right?
I mean, that's true.
You could have 500 individuals that come in at a quality as long as they bring it to the table.
Right.
And the reality is that any flaw, the biggest flaw that we have in this organization, and this is all organizations across the board, is that folks bring in raggedy people, right? Our organizations are full of raggedy members, right? Who quote unquote came in the right way, right? Yeah, you may have pledged and you may have then gone through some intake process that wasn't legal and all this other stuff like that. And then a couple of years down the road, you're no longer engaged in the fraternity. You don't pay dues anymore. So the reality is that you're not helping to keep the vision alive of my founders, right? As I tell a lot of members and I tell a lot of folks, especially new brothers who come in, the reason why you're a member today is because I paid my dues. The reason why Sigma still exists today is solely because we paid our dues. And if all the members cease to start paying their dues, then there's no fraternity, right? So the vision of A. Langston Taylor, Charles I. Brown, and Leonard F. Morris, that dies with the last person who, stops paying their dues. So then that next generation of individuals are no longer exposed to who we are as an organization. So why should I only, worry about people who come in, quote unquote, the right way, when I've seen the right way is not the same across the board, right?
Yeah, everybody's process is different. I would say that the brothers I've heard and the conversations I've had with the legacy clause isn't necessarily that, this person didn't come in the right way. It's more so in business, for example, like you don't want to give people something for free because they don't value it. You might want to give it to them at a discount because they have to have some level of investment.
So I would tell those brothers to go back and read what it is that we just passed at the conclave, right? That means that they're not informed, right? What it's saying to them is that we are absolutely identifying a group of individuals that we want to invest in, that we are hoping will become members of the organization by creating this special club, because what we want to do is be able to make sure that we are creating a pipeline. But they still got to go. If you're undergrad, you still got to get the right GPA. You still got to fill out the application. You still got to go through the evaluation process. You still got to get interviewed. This is not automatic, right? It's not automatic that you automatically become a member of the organization because your father was a Sigma or your mother was a Zeta. What we're trying to say is that we are creating a space in place to celebrate legacies so that they are more keen to want to become members of the organization, because that's what a good company does, right? We think through, how do I continue the membership of the organization? How do I continue making sure that the legacy of the organization continues by finding another way of creating a pipeline for that to happen? Because the only way that we have right now is you hope that a legacy will join. You hope that we'll find somebody on campus. But now what we're doing is we're creating a place where we are identifying legacies. Right. Off the rip, we're identifying legacies, and we're then making sure that our members know that these individuals exist, because it's totally different. Imagine now the brothers at Howard University here in DC, at the beginning of the fall, you get a list of, here goes a list of members, of potential members. Let me say a list of potential members whose fathers are current members of Phi Beta Sigma. Their sons are potential members that are now enrolled here on campus. Here goes a list of Sigma Betas who now go to Howard. Now you got a hit list of 20, 30 guys that you can actually go and now approach to be able to say, hey, because they know the values of Phi Beta Sigma. They're already exposed to the fraternity. You don't have to go and do the whole song and dance. If you got 30 or 40 members, 30 or 40 potential members, members already,
right,
compared to come to this smoker or come to this program or whatever the case may be. Maybe they will come to the program. Maybe they will do all that stuff because they're inclined. Because why? Because my dad's a Sigma, right? Because my dad has exposed me to it. I'm ready to do it, but it's the psychology of some of our members who thinking that, well, they're just getting it for free. No, you should look at it as the fact that they're already exposed to the organization. This should make it easier for them to become members of the organization instead of you having to do a whole bunch of programs to convince. Why? Because there's a lot of chapters out there who are hurting. When you think about this generation of young people who are coming in, these guys are so connected to their phones. Their interpersonal connection skills are not what they were for me 20 years ago. When I got on campus, I was seeking the opportunity to connect with somebody. But now I think about my daughter who's at the Naval Academy. Mm-hmm. My daughter is still connected to her friends from the first grade, second grade, right? My daughter's 20 years old because they had technology. And so she doesn't feel like she's not alone. And not saying that we joined these organizations because we were alone. Let me clarify that. But, because we didn't have the technology connections like my daughter has today, we were more forced to make real people connections, right? Compared to young men today who come on campus, but I'm cool with my boy, even though we're all going to different colleges, we can still get on the game and play and talk junk. We can FaceTime. And so why do I need to join a fraternity? Why do I need that connection point? Now, what they don't realize is that they need the connection point, especially when they graduate, and then they need that network. That is why we have seen a decline in, and this is not just Sigma, this is across the board. Statistically, you've seen a decline in collegiate membership, but the fastest growing number of individuals that join a fraternity is that segment of brothers who initially just graduate from college. You're 24, 25. Now, our membership numbers between 25 to 35 has exploded. Because why? Because they realize that they need that network. They need that connection point. And so now as an organization forward thinking, you're realizing now we need to make sure that we build a legacy pipeline so that some of these potential members are joining earlier, because I'm telling you, the landscape for the collegiate space is changing because a lot of the young folks don't feel like they need that initial connection point. And so all of the clubs around the country, they're joining other clubs. They're not even joining other fraternities. They're literally joining just other stuff, or they're not joining anything at all because they don't need to. If you speak to a lot of student life professionals, they'll tell you that. A lot of the kids, because they have their own ecosystems. So there's no need to join, there's no need to join that fraternity or whatever. And so now what you're seeing, and that's why creating the legacy pipeline allows for us to at least address what we are statistically already seeing. And that's what a good business does, right? It's like you look at trends, you look at the numbers, and you realize that there's been a shift. And so when I joined Sigma in the 90s, the largest demographic in the organization was the collegiate organization. The collegiate numbers were huge. Now we're 80% alumni as a fraternity. We're 80% alumni, 20% collegiate. Yes.
I know that.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, I guess that kind of makes sense because, there's just more people that are, graduate than have the opportunity to join.
Well, think about the fact that the population has grown, even in your 4 years of being in the organization, my time being in the fraternity, but all things are relative. And so the number of African-American males is still similar. The number is still similar as it relates to the number that's still in college, right? Compared to when I was there. But the reality is that a lot of guys aren't joining. They're just not. They're not joining at the collegiate level. You're joining at the alumni level. And then some of it, too, is because, there's still chapters, there's still haze. A lot of people ain't trying to put up with that. Folks don't got time for that. You got guys who are out here hurting folks. And a lot of these young people ain't about that life. They don't. And so it's not about, well, I got to go through something. The reality is some of these, the mindset of a lot of our young members today is not about dealing with that level of engagement.
Oh, okay. I get what you're saying. Yeah. That's why you were talking about all the calls at nationals beginning and stuff like that.
That's right.
Off the charts now, especially with technology nowadays. Back in the day, you could just
yeah. So so we hear about stuff sometimes before the advisor does, because folks have access. They have access.
That's crazy. But moving back to the legacy clause, I have my thoughts on that, but I don't want to take up too much time on that. I'm sure that you saw what happened on Howard's campus with the Alpha Chapter Deltas with that girl that denounced after a month. So I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on this denouncing epidemic.
Yeah, this is nothing new. I've been the president now for 3 years. And the reality is, we get letters all the time from brothers that denounce, their letters from the fraternity. But it's so minuscule that it's like a gnat. Okay, be blessed. It doesn't impact us. It doesn't impact our bottom line. I think, in this space now, I think it's a little bit more coordinated now than back in the day, right? Where someone who truly felt that, hey, I've found the Lord, and whatever teachings or whatever church that they have joined has convicted them in such a way that they feel like they can't engage engage in any type of organizational, camaraderie, then that's okay. But today you see, they got renouncing conferences and, renouncing and announcing. Yeah, they have conferences now on how to do it and how to go about, it's somewhat strategic now. But I think what's going to end up happening, what I think I can tell you, I know for us, we're getting ready to, we're not playing no games, right? You put our proprietary information out there, we will sue you. Just be prepared to have, just be prepared. It's okay to go away quietly. People have been going away for almost 110 years. They joined, they realized this isn't for them. Okay, go about your business. But to, try to bring down an entire organization, we're not trying to put our information out there. That's proprietary information. And you're going to start seeing a lot of individuals who are going to, have a lot of legal issues. I saw this one young lady who denounced Spelman. She denounced her college that she went to. So I'm thinking to myself,
what do you mean?
She denounced Spelman, just like, someone who denounced.
Like she got a degree from Spelman and said, I didn't.
Because she said that there was a ceremony that they do when they first go to the college. And so she's like, that's not of, her beliefs. And so I'm thinking to myself, then does that mean that you will not include that on your resume?
It has to.
Which means, so though, you're denouncing. So does that mean you're not going to include that on your resume? I hope not. But, I'm not caught up in the whole, the flurry of what it is. I think that, again, social media allows for us to see it real time, and you see a lot of it because we're all on it and we're in this space, in this world. This country has almost 400 million people. You think the folks are tracking that? If you add up all of the renouncing and the denouncing of all of our organizations, all 9 of our organizations, still talking about less than 2,000 people out of 6 million members, combined. We're not worried about that.
Okay. Oh yeah, this is a question that I got from Alpha Chapter Brother. It says, how do you intend to increase membership and better incentivize members to remain active in this current culture?
And he said this current culture?
Where many brothers are denouncing.
Yeah, well, I would tell that individual, not many are denouncing. I've probably gotten, 4 this year. So I don't know if that's many. The fraternity today is the largest membership in the history of our organization, and we're on track to break that record again this year. Mm-hmm. So in all 3 years that I've been the president, we've outpaced the previous year of our membership growth. And if you go back and I always say this to brothers, we are providing so much information and programming and professional development for our members that a lot of brothers probably don't even read all the emails with all of the opportunities and access that we provide, right? And so I would tell that brother, before he truly asks me that question, have you really taken time to look at all of the resources that we have as a fraternity that we're offering our members, right? From the perks at work, where you get mad discounts from multiple companies, to our partnerships that we have with corporations who are providing sometimes monthly webinars and seminars on professional development, economic development, how to invest in stocks, how to buy a home, how to make sure that your economic standing is better. If you haven't, as a member, attended any of those webinars that we've had, that's your loss as a member, right? And I know that there's a lot of brothers who are on that, but then I know there's a lot of brothers who still don't attend because they're not taking the time out, because as they look at the fraternity, sometimes it's just very chapter specific, right? Yeah. And not realizing that the fraternity nationally is providing a lot of resources. So I would tell brothers, I'm going to keep on doing what I'm doing right now, right? We have amazing partnerships with individuals that has provided great economic opportunities for the fraternity, and our membership continues to grow and has not been impacted by the few brothers who have renounced it. I've been president now for 3 years, and I would tell you that less than, 50 brothers have renounced. And I know that for a fact. So that's good. Yeah, this isn't like every other day we're coming in and there's 300-400 Sigmas going out the door. I haven't gotten anything for the month of July yet, but we got 15 more days to go.
Never know. And then lastly, what is one thing that you would change about the fraternity? If you could snap your finger, I would change this immediately.
Oh man, that everybody could see the fraternity like I see it. If I could snap my fingers, man, then that means everybody would be financial, right? Which would allow for us greater impact because we'd have greater resources and more engagement, because we are a great organization that's doing a lot of great things. Sometimes when I sit back, man, and I look at all the chapters around the world and I look at the work that they're doing, whether we're digging a hole in a village in Africa, or we're feeding the homeless in California, or we're getting blankets for folks in Boston. We got, school supplies for our kids in Florida. I am sometimes just amazed at the work of these men and the level school, the millions of dollars in scholarships that we're giving out every single year, these scholarship galas, scholarship luncheons, scholarship brunches, that they're providing amazing opportunities for communities that they're serving. I'm in awe. I'm in awe at the power of our organization and how we move as a fraternity. And so, but I would wish that more brothers could see that, that they can. But again, sometimes you have some brothers who, they join a chapter that may not be as engaging, and then
makes you less likely.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. Their view is not as broad as it should be. And so therefore they end up missing out overall on the beauty of what it is to be a member of our organization.
So I know you're also the president of Barber-Scotia. What made you want to take that role in reviving that campus?
Man, this is a God's journey, man. This is a God assignment for me to wake up and to want to save a historically Black college every day. This will be literally the hardest assignment that I will have to date, right? When we pull this off. But, man, I made a decision a long time ago to live my life fearless, right? Yes, this is a big task. Yes, it is not going to be easy, but I know that it's what I'm supposed to be doing. And I have watched God in this last year. Wednesday will be a year that I've had the honor to sit in the seat as president of Barber-Scotia College. And I have seen him show up in so many different ways, man, from people knocking on the door at the building that I go to almost every day to say, hey, I saw this on the news. I want to be, an adjunct. I would pray one day and say, man, I need an English professor. And then 2 days later, English professor would show up at the door. I've seen God just show up like that for me, right? But what I also do believe too, man, is that I get the chance to wake up and to preserve an institution that was designed to educate, people that look like me. And there's a need for institutions like that. We live in a country where there are still people who wake up who have a problem with the color of my skin, right? And it's not safe to whether it's be educated in their cities or on their campuses. And at least I know that at historically Black college or university, that there's truly a fighting chance for me and for that next generation of that individual that want to go to school to be able to set their family up for success, right? And so historically Black colleges, hands down, has been the great equalizer for the Black community, right? Period. Our middle class has not come from going to white schools. Our middle class has come from going to Black schools. And until we live in a nation where there are folks who wake up who are not offended by my skin color, I will fight day in and day out to make sure that there are institutions that are going to preserve who we stand for, who we are, our culture, and be able to educate us so that we can live in a world and a system that, we have no control over, but we got to navigate through. I was born in the Virgin Islands. So for me, my view of Black empowerment was ingrained in me a long time before I came to America, right? So there was nothing that no one could tell me about, I know that I'm not less than. I know my people aren't less than. I come from a culture where the governor's Black, all the senators are Black, everyone in power is Black. So when I came to East Carolina University, I was a student that helped start the NAACP chapter. I was a student that started the Black Student Union, because I understood the power of it. The reason why I had to go to a HCU instead of a HBCU was because scholarship, right? My family didn't have any money. And HBCUs at the time, they were recruiting me to run. I was the second fastest 200-meter runner time-wise when I graduated from high school in the nation. So I had full rides to almost every, major college in the country. For me, it was about just going to school and getting my family out of poverty. But what I always knew is that I was going to give back to my people. And so when I had the opportunity to lead a HBCU, I said, absolutely, I'm going to use this good mind to, and then when I think back to, my experience of leading a multi-million-dollar global nonprofit organization, I've been the mayor of a city, I've been officer in the military, I have corporate experience. Why not take all of that and pour it into running and reimagining what a historically Black college could be? What great opportunity, man, to help do that. And that's why I did it. I saw the challenge. I know it's a big mountain to climb, but
you're going to get there, man. Brick by brick, step one step.
That's right.
But, I'm a huge proponent of HBCUs. I went to Howard University, graduated in 2020, but I will say that one thing about HBCUs, it's all about the culture, man. And I remember listening to some of your interviews and you said you want to build the biggest online HBCU there is.
That's right.
So how are you going to preserve the HBCU culture in a virtual?
That's the beautiful part of this journey, right? And I don't have the answer for you today, but I know that it's possible because anything I think about can happen. There's nothing that we can't accomplish. And the goal is we're going to have a huge online HBCU presence. We're going to still have our in-person presence, right? But it won't be as big because I've realized that, there's a formula to this. And so it's hiring the right team and the right group of people that will make my students feel connected, even though you live in Iowa and you're going to Barber-Scotia College, right? How we do that, I don't have to figure it out right this second,
right?
But I know that there's groups of people that are out there that are smart and savvy, and they're going to want to be a part of a Barber-Scotia to help me create what that is going to be. Because you're right, the culture is going to be important. important. But when you think about the fact that as we move in higher ed, the greatest demographics of individuals in 20 to 30 years, they will be getting their education online, right? And so we have to be able to move and shift with it. And so we'll be ready, as an institution, we'll be ready, and we're going to be one of the leaders in this country that's going to be, leading the way on it.
Yep, rooting for you, man. And another thing you said about Barber-Scotia in a previous interview, you said every administration at Barber-Scotia is a building block. So that being said, when you finally pass the torch and your brick is cemented, when you look at that brick, what do you want?
Oh, man. I want this brick to say that we were the ones that brought the school back to being accredited. That's huge, because from that accreditation will then come everything else that we want to accomplish, right? We lost our accreditation 20 years ago, and this is our moment where I want them to be able to say this is where we truly turned a corner and then was able to start moving again, because we've been stuck for 20 years. And I want our brick to be the one that allows for us to start now adding more bricks, because we were able to get our accreditation back and we're able to move in the right direction. So
man, before we close out, I want to ask you, what do you want the viewers to take away from this episode?
So you heard me say today, I'm a college president. I'm a former mayor of a city. I'm a former military officer. I had the opportunity to work in the nonprofit space, to work in the corporate space. I would hope that individuals that's listening to the podcast today would realize that don't allow anyone to put you in a box for anything, right? You got to continue to reinvent yourself until you get to a space and place where you're comfortable, but you move for the moments, right? And don't feel that it's like some people feel like, hey, I was supposed to, my mom or my dad told me I should be a lawyer, but that's not what I really wanted to do. But I went into it because they told me that was the safe thing to do. Everything I've ever done has not been safe, right? And I've been in the Army, went to war, did all kind of crazy stuff. I remember during my time working at March of Dimes, huge multi-million-dollar nonprofit organization, and COVID hit, right? And they had to let me go. Scary, right? Same thing when I was in corporate America working for Sodexo. My family circumstance changed and I had to give up that opportunity. And that was a scary time. When I lost my job when March of Dimes laid tons of folks off. Now, granted, that was everybody getting laid off during COVID, but that was a scary time. Being the mayor of a city that had a lot of financial issues and challenges, that was a scary time, but we overcame it. And every step of the way, it was overcome. So I would tell people, man, take life as it comes, but realize that, man, you can move in spaces and places. You just have to be ready for the moment. And being ready for the moment means that when you have the opportunity, do it well, right? So that when the next opportunity comes, they will remember, yeah, man, this dude here, he killed it. And so therefore, you're now being rewarded. God is now giving you the opportunity to elevate your station in life, because the little bit that he gave you dominion over, you did well. And so now here I am in the space and place where I get to save an entire college, which means that there are thousands of alumni that's connected to it, whose lives were impacted by this institution, who want to send their kids, and then a potential economy that can be impacted. All of that can happen because God has given me this new assignment, because all the previous assignments that I was given to, I put my head down and I did it the very best that I could. And you got a lot of people, man, they do the work, they do a job and they half-ass it, right? And the reality is that you got to be in the moment, do it well, excel in it, and then just wait for the next, because greater is always coming. It always is. It's just the way life works. And so this is my next greater, saving a whole college, and we're going to make it happen. Then after that, we'll see what God takes us after that, man. I live in expectation of him creating opportunities for me. That's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, man. I've seen him work. I've seen him do amazing, amazing things. And I live in expectation of it. So hopefully that's what I hope the folks will take away from this, man.
Hey, very powerful. I can't wait to see you cement that brick, get that accreditation, man. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast on a whim. And anything you want to plug real quick, a website, Barber-Scotia?
That's right. Go to Barber-Scotia, www.b-sc.edu. And I would ask you, please make a contribution to the college. I'm getting ready. My investiture, my inauguration is next month, August 24th. Everybody's invited. It's going to be a party, August 24th. Information goes up on the website this week, actually, on, how to support. But I would tell you, if you went to an HBCU and you support your HBCU, thank you. If you want to branch out and support another HBCU, think about Barber-Scotia College. I like to tell folks, we're the new Morris Brown, and Morris Brown did it, and Barber-Scotia is going to do it too. We're going to get back reaccredited. We want their support, and we appreciate them so much.
Yes, sir. All right. Thank you for tuning in. Beyond Ordinary Podcast. Hope y'all were inspired today. Till next time. Peace.